Creating a web app with authentication and a database in Google AI Studio is pretty straightforward, so let's walk through how it all comes together. First, I'll create the website. Create a business landing page for Error Farm. Keep the design clean, professional, and software tech focused. There is the web page. Publishing it is a total no-brainer, but I will show you the steps anyway because we will need a published site later when we test the web app in a production environment. I'll create a new project and give it a name. This requires a billing account. If you don't have one yet, you can add your credit card details to create it right here. I already have a Google Cloud billing account that I have been using for years, long before Google AI Studio even existed, so I will just use that one. With that in place, we're ready to click Publish App. It's live, so let's take a look. Nice! Next up is login functionality, and I'll use Google Authentication for that. There are plenty of ways to build a backend with authentication, but Firebase is easily one of the simplest options. It makes adding Google login quick, keeps user data secure, and handles a lot of best practices out of the box. It also integrates nicely with other services. If you haven't used Firebase, it's a Google service with generous free tiers. For example, authentication supports up to 50,000 monthly active users at no cost. So the first step is creating a new Firebase project. It asks if we want AI assistance, and I'll keep that enabled because it'll be helpful later when it comes time to define the security rules for the database. Then it asks about Google Analytics. I'll skip it this time. If additional analytics are needed, you can enable it and provide your Google Analytics account, and the rest of the steps in this tutorial stay the same. The project is ready, and now it's time to add the app. If you needed a backend for mobile apps too, you could select that here, but we will create a web app only. I won't set up Firebase hosting because Google AI Studio hosts apps in Google Cloud, so I'm only using Firebase for the authentication and the database. Here is the information on how to set up the configuration in your client, but I'll show you how to find that in the settings instead. Click the settings icon, go to General, scroll to the bottom, and copy the Firebase config to the clipboard so it can be passed into Gemini. Before I go back to AI Studio, let's quickly enable authentication. Select Google as the provider, click Enable, and add a support email address. I'll use a Google Groups email I created earlier. Now back in AI Studio, it's time to update the web app. Integrate Firebase Google Authentication. When the user clicks the Login button, redirect to a personal details page using this Firebase configuration. Then I paste in the configuration. Gemini's ready, so let's test it. A login pop-up appears, but it disappears almost immediately. Firebase error, unauthorized domain. That's expected. Google Authentication needs to know which domains are allowed to send login requests. Before I fix that, I'll publish the app and test it there too, so both domains can be added at once. Same issue in the published app. I'll inspect the page, check the console, and confirm the error is identical. I'll copy the URL of the published app. Back in Firebase, go to Authentication Settings and find Authorized Domains. Paste the published URL there. Let's test it again. Looks like the pop-up works this time. And there's the personal details page. Next, to get the test environment domain, go to Settings and open Integrations. There's the app URL. Copy it and add it to the authorized domains as well. Now the test environment works too. The last thing to check is that the logged-in user shows up in the authenticated users list in Firebase. It looks like it works too, so we can finish the authentication part and move on to configuring the database. The plan is to create a feedback page where users can submit feedback that gets stored in the database. For this, I'll use Cloud Firestore. If you prefer the Firebase Realtime Database, the steps are nearly the same. Only the security rules differ, and I'll show you both. I'll choose the Standard Edition. The free tier includes tens of thousands of reads and writes per day, which is more than enough for most apps. Enterprise Edition is aimed at large-scale, complex use cases. The database ID stays as default, and I'll leave the location as is. Next are the security rules. Test mode allows anyone to read and write for 30 days, while production mode blocks everything by default. I'll choose production mode because the first thing we do is create the security rules we actually need. I'll use the AI assistant here and ask, I want to have a feedback collection and I need security rules that allow only authenticated users to read and write only their own data. The generated rules look good, so I'll copy them. They allow all authenticated users to read feedback, but restrict writes so users can only write their own data. That works well for this use case. This is a key moment to think carefully about access control. The security of the app depends on these rules, so it's worth taking time to define exactly what users should and shouldn't be allowed to do. Checking examples in the documentation can help here. To show the alternative, I'll also take a quick look at the documentation for Firebase Realtime Database. These are the security rules for Cloud Firestore, and over here are the rules for the Firebase Realtime Database. The syntax looks a bit different there, but the idea is the same. Authenticated users can only access their own data, the auth variable must not be null, and the user ID must match. Back in Firebase, I'll publish the Firestore rules. It's worth noting that changes can take up to a minute to propagate, so giving it a moment before testing is important. Now it's time to add the feedback page. Add a feedback page for authenticated users only. Save feedback submissions to my default Firestore instance using these security rules. Then I paste in the rules. Let's test it out. I'll give 4 stars and write some feedback. Feedback harvested. Nice. No errors this time. Back in Firestore, the data is there. The rating and feedback are saved, along with additional fields like email, user ID, timestamp, and username. That covers the database setup. If you want even more security, check out my video about configuring Firebase App Check. That wraps up the tutorial. If this was helpful, share it with a colleague. See you in the next one.